Recently, my channel grew to over 500 subscribers, and I want to say thank you to all of you that have subscribed to my channel or that are tuning in each week. In February, I started at Crosswinds Counseling here in Fort Wayne, and I started seeing people as a therapist mainly in the mornings. So if you do live in Indiana or you're looking to refer somebody who lives in Indiana, you can use my self-schedule link to either schedule in person or online. The link will be in the description below and in my profile from now on. Now, my intent with making these videos isn't to make money or self-promote, but to be helpful and to teach people what I wish somebody would have taught me in graduate school, and for those looking to improve their mental health.